Welcome to the Health Changers across the pond and back. And all of us here are passionate about helping people to change their health destiny. Today's topic is about toxins. And Frank is going to be talking about environmental toxins in relation to hormone disruption and obesity. Jayney's going to be talking about toxic relation, frenemies. And I'm going to be talking about environmental toxins, and Gareth is going to be talking about toxic attitudes. So lots to come. So let me introduce our amazing panel. This is Dr. Frank Sabatino, who's been plant-based, I think, since Moses parted the Red Sea. So he recently completed a book called Weight Loss, Compassionate Weight Loss for Life. He also has an online course called Lean for Life, The Science of Effective Weight Loss, and you can find more at drfranksabatino.com. We have Jeanne Goddard, who's the president of the Complementary Medical Association, and she's one of the leading experts of natural anti-aging and integrative medical fields. And she's written several bestsellers, including Rewind Your Body Clock. I mean, please look at the woman. I mean, like, she looks amazing. Like, please, like, you're just incredible. And then we have Gareth R. Davies. And he helps others to reduce or eliminate high blood pressure, their medications, through his no meds method. You can connect with him at healthchangers.net. And I myself, I'm Jeanne Schumacher. I'm founder of Simply Plant Based, and I have several programs to help people transition to a plant-based lifestyle, including the Weight Loss Advantage. And we just launched the Pregnancy Advantage to help women get their bodies pregnant ready, or if you're having trouble dealing with fertility. So, Dr. Frank, you're going to be talking about environmental toxins in relation to hormone disruption and obesity. Take it away.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Some time back, I was reading an article on obesity that made the point that it seemed that pockets of really obese people were found in close to industrial waste centers. And the idea in this article suggested that, well, maybe in these places where there's so much industry and all of that, it's possible that the lifestyles that they were living maybe entertain less activity, poorer food choices. Maybe that contributed to the pattern of obesity and weight gain. But what they discovered was that that was not the case, that in fact, as the industrial waste exposure, the environmental toxins from these industries went up, there seemed to be a direct relationship with the increase in weight gain and obesity. And so what came out of that is that many of these byproducts of industry, pollution, pesticides, things that are put in plastic bottles and wraps, in the metals that line cans, and we'll talk about those specifically, these chemicals are all derived from what we call fossil fuels, which are the very things we burn for energy. So the interesting thing is fossil fuels, as the name states, are coming from the bodies basically of old dead animals, fossils, in connection with decaying earth over eons of time. So because these chemicals are derived from the same oil and reserves that we burn for energy, these chemicals are basically very fat soluble, and they're derived from basically an animal source, old fossils. So what was observed is that when animals were exposed to these chemicals, various species, there was a disruption in their ability to reproduce. Their thyroid hormone production was affected. Their adrenal function was affected. So the endocrine system of these animals and their abilities to reproduce seem to be incredibly compromised by exposure to these kinds of chemicals, these fossil fuel derived chemicals. And the interesting thing is that because they are, if you will, derived from oil reserves, they are what we call fat soluble. So they're able to dissolve in an oil medium. They're able to dissolve in fat and oil. So when these chemicals are put into the bodies of all mammals, including us, our bodies, in their wisdom, do something pretty amazing. We know that these chemicals can create a toxic effect on brain and hormonal systems and heart and liver and kidney. So when you're exposed to them, the body in its wisdom will try to dissolve these chemicals in the best oil reserve that it has. And that, of course, is our fat tissue. So all the visceral fat and layers of fat in the body become a storage depot for these remarkable environmental toxins and chemicals. And it goes even a step further. We find that because the body can protect us against the damaging effect of these chemicals, not only do we store them in fat cells, But when we are exposed to them, these chemicals will stimulate baby fat cells in the body to grow into mature fat cells. So it will remarkably increase body fat percentage and weight gain. So there's a whole body of evidence now addressing these chemicals derived from industry as what are called obesogens. So they're both considered hormone disruptors and now chemicals that promote the ongoing process of obesity. And again, the compounds come in several different flavors. You get things like bisphenol A, BPA, which shows up in, of course, water bottles, plastic wraps, the metal casings of cans. You get things called phthalates that are involved in the plasticizing industry, all the making of plastics. Then you got these polychlorobiphenyls, these PCBs, that are found in many of the pesticides. So the bottom line is these byproducts are found very prevalently in industry, and they have very long-term effects. For example, there are data to suggest that babies that are breastfed, when mother's milk has a higher PCB content, they have a remarkable increased weight and size at puberty. So think about how a baby being in utero and then breastfed in those early stages, as much as 10 to 15 to 20 years later, are showing an impact on obesity related to that early exposure. So it's a remarkable long-term effect. The increase of phthalates in the plasticizing industry that is found in urine, for example, the urine levels as they go up, we see an increased weight size, an increase in insulin resistance, and a dose-related effect on diabetes. So, and that happens even in much later years. So the impact of these exposures can have an impact not only in present time in terms of weight gain, but creating effects that can manifest, in some cases, decades later because of their ability to be stored in fat tissue that can then be released over time. And then, of course, we have the story of not only the disruption of hormone and not only the promotion of weight gain, but also the disruption of the gut microbiota. Because now we know, for example, when you have weed killers like glyphosate, for example, they are notorious for damaging healthy flora in the gut that the body needs to make the plush lining, the mucus linings that are our first line of defense in the immune system. And we also now know that there are about 20 different chemicals released from gut flora that play a major role in satiety signals in the brain, giving us signals of when to stop eating. So when we see this widespread effect, these various chemicals and things like glyphosate have such a long-term effect on gut damage with the microbiota. And so this feedback in weight gain, the impact of the actual gut flora on controlling satiety and weight gain, the impact of the ability to drive this into storage forms in fat cells, this impact of, again, the tremendous increase in body fat and the outcome of diabetes even decades later after the exposure to these chemicals, make this a very problematic input. And the intriguing thing is, as much as we have focused in the weight gain story on factors of calories in, types of food, physical activity, and the like, it has been woefully inadequate in addressing this underlying factor of environmental toxicity in the global epidemic of obesity. When you think about the fact, and in countries like the United States now, close to 70% of people are either overweight or obese, I think it becomes significantly important that industries in many ways step up to the plate or somehow are coerced to understand their role in kind of disseminating this kind of toxicity into the environment and into the general food supply and working supply that people are exposed to, and how that can be affecting our population from the moment of birth and even prenatally, right on up into adulthood in this exposure to these environmental toxins. And that's where techniques like fasting and things of that nature, which literally start to break down fat reserves to use that fat for energy, will also now start to mobilize some of that toxic debris and waste from the storage areas of the body to a place where we can eliminate them through all of the mucus linings and all, skin, lungs, bowels, all the ways that we would eliminate from the body. But I think this is one of those areas that is getting a lot more airplay, obviously, and is very significant in how we are creating this incredible global epidemic of obesity and affecting everything from the way we store fat to the way we use fat to the way fat is produced to even the integrity of the gut microflora that we have for playing a role in the satiety signals and in weight regulation, and how it can be incredibly damaged by the exposure to these man-made chemicals that are now ubiquitous in our food, water supply all around us.
One of the things that I have found that as you start to lose the weight, or you change your diet, you change your lifestyle, you start to lose the weight and you're starting to break down these fats. And talk to us a little bit more about these toxins and like some of the impact that you're going to feel.
What people don't realize is that when you have a detoxification process, and people use that word a lot, all it really means is that you're immobilizing these kinds of chemicals from the storage areas of the body into the bloodstream and then out the organs of elimination. And of course, when you have a process like a water fast, for example, so much energy is now available for that process because it's diverted from the digestive process because you're not eating. So all of that energy will step up that elimination and detoxification. But understand that when the body starts throwing that waste off, it's going to create a set of symptoms and actions that are the vehicle for that elimination. So you can have drainage and discharge from every opening of the body, mucus discharge from the lungs, vaginal discharge in women, things that erupt on the skin that can be coming as the body is mobilizing that stuff. So it's not always a friendly, comfortable process. It can be associated with discomfort. It can be associated with pain. And of course, in our culture, whenever we have any of that discomfort or pain, we want to suppress that with some form of medication or treatment, when in fact, that may be the only thing saving your life in that moment of time. But just understand that the process is energy demanding. It will use the vehicles of the body, the vehicles of elimination, the organs of elimination. And it is a process that is in our best interest, but it can be associated with signs and symptoms of discomfort.
So Frank, apart from water fasting, what else can people do to avoid or to make the best of themselves in toxins all around them?
Yeah, it's not even about going to a more extreme process of elimination like fasting. I mean, if you think about people coming from a more conventional way of living and eating, and even moving into a more plant-focused approach, that movement alone is going to be big enough that's going to start to promote those changes. I mean, people will sometimes do things like juice programs or smoothie programs or fasting programs, but truthfully, for most people, just making the change from their conventional way of living and eating to the more natural approach, plant-centered, you're going to already see this process of elimination start to begin. And we see it when people come to centers because they'll start having headaches and discharge and things just by making the dietary change. So I would just say getting on a good track. This is also another reason why eating more organically has value, not only for the nutrient value, but if you think about it, now we know that if you have these sprays and man-made chemicals on these plants, they themselves are feeding a whole level of disruption on a hormonal level, on a weight gain level, and so on. So that's why people try to adhere to, the clean 15 and the dirty dozen and these things that have all been published that people can get to online talking about the most heavily sprayed crops. I tend to recommend that when you're eating plants that grow close to the ground, get them as organically as possible. So all of those ground plants have kind of shorter root systems so that when they're sprayed, those chemicals will seep into that root system and into the body of those plants. So all of the lettuces and celeries and tomatoes and cucumbers and all of these things, in my opinion, should really be as organic as possible and to try to avoid any exposure to these sprays. And that's why also the GMO foods have to be avoided because they tend to be the most heavily sprayed. They were really created by Monsanto, those seeds, to be weed and bug resistant. So what happens is a weed killer and bug resistant, so they wind up getting sprayed even more So that's why these heavily GMO crops like corn and soy and canola oil and things of this nature, if you're going to use them, they need to be as organic as possible to avoid as much of the exposure to these organic solvents as possible, these weed killers and pesticides. And again, this is something we can all do. And this also plays into household products. And I know Jeanne's going to talk about that too. So the bottom line is, our exposure to these chemicals needs to be addressed. We can do it in food supply. We can do it in certain ways that way. We're going to have a certain amount of that exposure in environment, even in connection to the digital things that we use and computers and so on and so forth. There's going to be things in air and around us. It's a tricky thing, but, as much as you can control it by the food supply you're eating and those kinds of things, the better off we all are.
Very interesting, actually, over here in the UK and in Europe. Back in January 2020, we were all going, yay, fantastic. They're actually taking the BPA out of till receipts. I don't know if the viewers will know, but BPA is in till receipts. Any kind of thermoprinting device uses BPA as part of the process. So we were all going, happy days, this is good, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize it's been replaced by BPS, which is just exactly the same sort of problem, but under a different name. It's one of those things that people have to look out for. Don't touch your till receipts or any kind of thermoprinted material. They're finding, you were saying about people living near toxic dumps and so on, but actually they're finding people that live near paper plants are having the same obesity issues as well, and general kind of chronic disease issues. And the other thing that has been very much in the news over here in the UK is the other plastics and the plasticizers in tea bags. So I'm sure that you guys are going to talk about that. But yes, I don't know if it's come up on your radar in the USA and where you are, Gareth, in the far frozen north. But yeah, we've got major problems with tea bags. And of course, for Brits, that's a big issue.
Thank you, Jayney. Tea bags. Wow. That just opened up a whole new world for me. Wow. Your health is so much worth working for. Make every bite count, make every action count. And if you need help, all of us here can help you on your journey. So we'll see you in the next episode.